what are different between these two, right? What traits are different? So I've got four columns there. Sorry, 3 columns, 4 rows. Leadership. So CEO does, is the place where the buck stops. So they do have to lead by authority. And by authority doesn't mean they have to lack empathy or influence or whatever. But unlike a product leader or even a product manager, where they may not have a large reporting organization that reports into them and they're completely and only managing by influence, CEOs do have everybody reporting to them, and they themselves may be reporting to the board or whatever. And so therefore there is this difference. This is one of the places where I think a lot of PMs may not, either by skill set or by interest, want to jump the pool from product management to CEO, because managing people and a large organization, very different beast than managing products, features, roadmaps, trends, etc. But this is one key difference. The second one is CEOs have to learn to delegate a lot. And I think this is, and I think it's easier to imagine for the larger companies, and maybe some of you work for those. But if you imagine younger startups, when I see product CEOs or founders, typically start as product leaders for their companies as they grow, and then they have their first product manager and so on and so forth. They struggle with delegation. They struggle with giving it away. There's too much of like, this is either my baby or I need to tweak it or whatever it is. So I think this is one challenge. The other one is that PMs are inherently very collaborative because they don't have all the accountability and the responsibility, but they don't have necessarily in that sense the ownership of the organization. So they're very good at collaborative skills. So unlike the previous point, I think this helps PMs become great CEOs because they already have this ability to influence and collaborate. So imagine if you suddenly got added, the organizational responsibility and the authority over the organization, you can be a terrific CEO. And we'll look at this example later, but Sundar Pichai of Google, who I overlapped with for a few years back, 10, 12 years ago, he's a great example of someone who was really, really competent on the right 2 columns and has sort of transitioned to be a great CEO over the last 4-5 years at Google. Of course, the strategy for the CEO is really focused on the business holistically, whereas a PM is really focused on the product and the product strategy and so forth. And I know this conference and this particular event is around product strategy, so maybe I'll talk a little bit about that later. Next comes the metrics. So here, of course, pretty straightforward. I mean, you guys can see the screen for those of you there. CEOs focused on the overall P&L, cash flow. Obviously, customer delight would be common to both. Whereas the product manager is much more focused on the customer delight, on NPS, Net Promoter Score. And that, of course, goes hand in hand with revenue or conversion or whatever your kind of core metric is that you're tracking, right? MRR, if you're in a SaaS area or a enterprise software area. So those are the kinds of things that are different. In one case, notice that in particular, the PM is not managing the P&L. So you're typically focused, largely speaking, on the top line, on the revenue, on the customers, on the conversion, whereas a CEO has to manage the top and the bottom line, right? And that is very, very critical. And that, by the way, leads to difference in behavior. So when you're doing this allocation of capital, it is not just like, keep building, keep building, keep building. Sometimes you have to say, we have to stop doing things, right? And you have to make those calls. And by the way, PMs also have to do that, at least when they're working in leadership roles. What is one critical thing that's common to the two, and since the theme of this particular event at IPL is around product strategy, I think where the business and the product intersect are in the product strategy. So the business has a vision about what they want to build for the world, what they want to solve for the customers. The product manager potentially has a vision of how to deliver something, and where they meet, according to me, is product strategy, right? Which is, how do you translate the business vision for what the business wants to serve into something that the customers can, leverage and use and use that to solve their problems and so forth. So that's where the product and the CEO kind of overlap, I would say, quite significantly.